The air on the Death Star 2 crackled with agony and dark power. Emperor Palpatine's cackle echoed through the throne room as blue lightning surged from his fingertips, tearing through Luke Skywalker. Darth Vader, standing by, felt the familiar tremor of the Force, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the Emperor's power, it was the raw, untamed suffering of his son. A memory, fleeting but potent, of Padme's last breath, of a promise unfulfilled, flickered behind the black mask. This was not the path to order. This was madness. A chaotic dance of sadism that would ultimately consume everything, including the very structure Vader had helped build. The Emperor was a cancer, and the galaxy, his patient, was dying. A decision, cold and precise as a lightsaber cut, solidified in Vader's mind. With a guttural roar that was more machine than man, he lifted his master, the frail, cackling form of Palpatine, and hurled him down the reactor shaft. The explosion that followed was not just the death of a tyrant, but the birth of a new, terrifying order. Luke, barely conscious, watched through blurring eyes as his father, the Dark Lord, stood over the precipice, the Force swirling around him like a tempest. The Death Star 2 shuddered, the rebellion's assault intensifying. Vader turned, his heavy breathing filling the void. "The Emperor is dead," his vocoder rasped, the words echoing with chilling finality. "The galaxy is mine." The Iron Rain. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The Imperial fleet, leaderless and demoralized by the sudden loss of their Emperor, crumbled under the rebel assault. Yet, Vader, with a cold efficiency that shocked even his most loyal commanders, took command. He ordered a strategic retreat, abandoning the Death Star 2 to its destruction, but salvaging key flagships and personnel. The rebellion celebrated a Pyrrhic victory, unaware that a far greater darkness had merely changed its form. Within weeks, Darth Vader, now simply Emperor's Vader, began to reshape the Galactic Empire. His first act was a brutal purge. Gone were the sycophantic Moffs and Grand Admirals who had thrived under Palpatine's capricious rule. Those who questioned his authority, or whose loyalty was suspect, met swift and merciless ends. Grand Moff Tarkin's ruthless efficiency was the blueprint. Vader's personal touch was the unyielding, omnipresent fear. Luke Skywalker, rescued from the Death Star 2 by a desperate last-minute Imperial shuttle dispatched by Vader himself, found himself a prisoner. Not in a cell, but in a gilded cage within Vader's newly established command center on Coruscant. Vader, no longer interested in converting Luke to the dark side, sought instead to control him, to understand the raw power he possessed, and perhaps, in a twisted way, to protect the last vestige of his past. Luke became a silent, defiant presence, a constant reminder of the light Vader had extinguished within himself. Under Emperor Vader, the Empire became a machine of unparalleled efficiency. Corruption, once rampant, was eradicated with extreme prejudice. Hyperlane pirates vanished, their vessels vaporized without warning. Resource allocation was streamlined. Planetary governors were held to impossible standards, and dissent was met not with public executions, but with silent, complete disappearances. The galaxy was safe, but it was a safety born of absolute terror. Vader's vision was not one of conquest for conquest's sake, but of ultimate, unyielding order. He dismantled the remnants of the Sith cults, seeing them as unstable and prone to the same chaotic ambition that had consumed Palpatine. The Force, to him, was a tool, a means to enforce his will, not a mystical path. He sought to understand its raw power, free from the weakness of emotions or attachments. His personal guards were not dark Jedi, but elite, unfeeling stormtroopers, their loyalty absolute, their training brutal. The crushing peace. The rebellion, initially emboldened by Palpatine's fall, found itself facing a far more formidable foe. Vader's empire was not prone to the infighting and strategic blunders that had plagued Palpatine's regime. Every move was calculated, every countermeasure precise. Leia Organa, now a weary but determined leader, struggled to unite disparate systems against a tyranny that was both more subtle and more pervasive than before. There were no more grand speeches about freedom, only whispered hopes and desperate, often futile, acts of sabotage. Han Solo, ever the pragmatist, found himself running ever riskier smuggling operations, not for profit, but to ferry supplies and intelligence to the scattered pockets of resistance. Chewbacca remained his loyal shadow, a constant reminder of the wild freedom they once knew. Years passed. The galaxy settled into a cold, crushing peace. The stars, once a symbol of endless possibility, now felt like a vast, empty expanse under Vader's watchful eye. Planets thrived economically, but their populations lived under constant surveillance, their lives dictated by imperial decree. Art, music, and free expression withered, replaced by state-sanctioned propaganda glorifying order and the Emperor's unwavering might. Vader, alone in his vast chambers on Coruscant, often stood before a holographic projection of the galaxy, the countless star systems mere dots of light under his control. The respirator hissed, a constant reminder of his existence. He had achieved his goal, order, but at what cost? The echoes of Anakin Skywalker, once a distant whisper, now screamed in the silence of his mind. He had become the ultimate enforcer, the unyielding hand of destiny. Yet, the peace he had forged was hollow, devoid of joy, of love, of the very light he had sought to extinguish. He ruled a perfect, silent, and utterly broken galaxy. The air within the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star crackled with a malevolent energy. Blue lightning, thick and searing, erupted from Emperor Palpatine's gnarled fingers, striking Luke Skywalker with devastating force. Luke's screams, raw and agonizing, tore through the metallic hiss of Darth Vader's respirator. Each surge of pain that racked his son's body resonated deep within Vader, stirring something long dormant beneath the layers of cybernetics and dark-side corruption. A fleeting image, sharp and vivid, pierced through the darkness of his mind. Padme Amidala, her face etched with sorrow, her last breath a whisper of love and despair. The promise he had made to himself, to bring order, had been twisted into this grotesque spectacle of suffering. Palpatine was not building a stable empire, he was indulging in a chaotic, self-serving sadism that would ultimately devour everything, including the very structure Vader had painstakingly helped to erect. The Emperor was a disease, and the galaxy, his unwitting victim, was slowly being consumed. A cold, calculated decision, sharper than any lightsaber, solidified in Vader's mind. This was not the path. This was madness. With a guttural roar, a sound more akin to a wounded beast than a man, he moved. He seized his master, the frail, cackling form of Palpatine, lifting him high above his head. The Emperor's eyes widened in shock, his lightning now arcing wildly, harmlessly, into the throne room's ceiling. With a surge of strength, fueled by a desperate, buried love and a chilling resolve for true order, Vader hurled Palpatine down the reactor shaft. The ensuing explosion was cataclysmic, a final, echoing testament to the death of the old tyranny. Luke, barely conscious, watched through blurring eyes as his father, the Dark Lord, stood silhouetted against the inferno, the force swirling around him like a tempest. The Death Star, too, shuddered violently, the rebel assault intensifying outside. Vader turned, his heavy breathing filling the sudden, terrifying silence. His vocoder rasped, the words chilling in their finality. "The Emperor is dead. The galaxy is mine." The true reign of terror had just begun. The Death Star, too, was a dying beast, its core tearing itself apart. But even amidst the chaos, a new, chilling order began to assert itself. The Imperial fleet, reeling from the sudden, inexplicable demise of their Emperor, teetered on the brink of complete collapse. Commanders, accustomed to Palpatine's distant, manipulative rule, found themselves leaderless, their comm channels filled with panicked chatter and conflicting orders. It was in this vacuum that Darth Vader, now simply Emperor's Vader, moved with the cold precision of a predator. His first directive, barked through a secure channel to the most senior surviving officers, was shocking. Abandon the Death Star, too. Let the Rebel Alliance revel in their hollow victory. Vader's focus was not on a single battle, but on the long game. He ordered a strategic retreat, not a rout, ensuring that key flagships, vital personnel, and critical intelligence were salvaged from the collapsing battle. Star Destroyers, once locked in a desperate struggle, disengaged with chilling efficiency, jumping to hyperspace just as the superweapon exploded in a blinding flash. The rebellion celebrated, unaware that they had merely traded one tyrant for a far more focused and dangerous one. Within weeks, the remnants of the Imperial war machine were reassembled, not under the old sprawling bureaucracy, but under Vader's direct, unyielding command. His first act as the new Emperor was a brutal, systematic purge. The sycophantic moffs who had thrived on Palpatine's unpredictable whims, the Grand Admirals whose loyalty was more to their own ambition than to the Empire's true strength, and any officer deemed inefficient or questionable, met swift and merciless ends. There were no trials, no public pronouncements, just silent disappearances followed by the promotion of those who displayed unwavering loyalty and ruthless competence. Grand Moff Tarkin's cold, calculating efficiency had been the Empire's blueprint under Palpatine. Now, Vader's personal touch was the unyielding, omnipresent fear that permeated every rank. This swift, decisive action sent a clear message throughout the galaxy. The old order was dead, and a new, absolute authority had risen. One that would tolerate no weakness, no dissent, and no failure. The Empire was no longer just a regime. It was an extension of Vader's iron will. Luke Skywalker lay amidst the sparking wreckage of the Emperor's throne room, his body racked with pain, the Force barely a whisper within him. The Death Star, too, groaned around him, its imminent destruction a terrifying certainty. He expected to die, to be consumed by the fiery demise of the superweapon. But then, a shadow fell over him, not the Emperor's, but his father's. Darth Vader, the new Emperor, had dispatched a desperate, last-minute Imperial shuttle, not to save himself, but to retrieve his son. Luke was hauled aboard, barely conscious, his burned hand throbbing. He awoke later not in a sterile Imperial infirmary, but in opulent, if chillingly stark, quarters on Coruscant. This was not a prison cell, at least not in the conventional sense. It was a gilded cage within Vader's newly established command center, a sprawling complex that had once been Palpatine's private retreat. The windows offered a panoramic view of the endless city planet, but the doors were sealed, guarded by silent, unblinking stormtroopers. Vader himself visited, his presence a suffocating weight in the Force. He no longer spoke of converting Luke to the dark side, nor did he offer a place by his side as an apprentice. That path, for Vader, had become tainted by Palpatine's chaotic sadism. Instead, Vader sought to control Luke, to understand the raw, untamed power that flowed through his son, a power that mirrored his own, yet remained stubbornly aligned with the light. Luke was a living enigma, a constant, agonizing reminder of the life Anakin Skywalker had abandoned, and the light he had extinguished within himself. In a twisted, almost paternal way, Vader sought to protect Luke, to keep this last vestige of his past close under his direct, unwavering gaze. Luke became a silent, defiant presence in the heart of the new Empire, a constant, living echo of hope that Vader could neither fully extinguish nor fully embrace. He was a prisoner of immense power, a potential tool to be studied and, perhaps, eventually understood, but never truly free. His existence was a stark, daily confrontation for Vader, a chilling mirror reflecting the choices that had led him to this lonely, absolute throne. Under Emperor Vader, the Galactic Empire underwent a chilling transformation. Gone were the days of Palpatine's convoluted bureaucracy, rife with backroom deals, petty rivalries, and the slow creep of corruption that had gnawed at its foundations. Vader, with his singular focus on absolute order, saw these inefficiencies as weaknesses, cancers that needed to be excised with extreme prejudice. The Empire became a machine, honed and sharpened, its every gear turning with ruthless efficiency. Corruption, once a pervasive shadow, was eradicated with a swiftness that stunned even the most hardened Imperial officers. Planetary governors who had grown rich on illicit tariffs or diverted resources found their accounts frozen, their assets seized, and their very existence simply erased. There were no public trials, no grand pronouncements, just an unsettling silence followed by the appointment of a new, equally unyielding replacement. The message was clear. Personal gain at the Empire's expense would not be tolerated. Fear became the most effective deterrent, far more potent than any legal code. The once notorious hyperlane pirates, who had plagued shipping lanes and terrorized outer rim worlds under the previous regime, vanished almost overnight. Vader deployed specialized fleets, equipped with advanced tracking systems and commanded by officers hand-picked for their unwavering brutality. Pirate vessels were not boarded or captured. They were simply vaporized without warning, their debris scattered across the void as a grim warning to any who dared disrupt Imperial commerce. The stars, once a haven for lawlessness, became a silent, dangerous highway. Resource allocation was streamlined with cold, logical precision, ensuring that the Empire's vast military machine and infrastructure projects received exactly what they needed, when they needed it. Planetary governors were no longer judged on their ability to appease the Emperor, but on their unwavering adherence to impossible quotas and their system's absolute compliance. Dissent, once met with public executions that could sometimes spark further rebellion, was now handled with chilling subtlety. Those who spoke out, those who organized whispers of resistance, simply disappeared. Their families were left with no answers. Only a pervasive, paralyzing fear that ensured silence from others. The galaxy under Emperor Vader became safe, but it was a safety born of omnipresent terror, a peace enforced by an iron fist that left no room for freedom. Under Emperor Vader, the very nature of the Force and its place in the galaxy was fundamentally altered. Palpatine had reveled in the dark side's chaotic power, fostering secret Sith cults and indulging in ancient rituals. Vader, however, saw these practices as inherently unstable, prone to the same infighting and treacherous ambition that had ultimately consumed Palpatine himself. His vision was of ultimate order, and anything that introduced an element of unpredictable chaos, even within the dark side, was a threat. Thus, one of his first sweeping decrees as Emperor was the systematic dismantling of all known Sith cults and any lingering remnants of Jedi teachings. Imperial Inquisitors, once tasked with hunting down Jedi, were now repurposed to seek out and eradicate any group or individual who practiced Force mysticism outside of Vader's direct control. Temples, hidden enclaves, and ancient texts were either destroyed or seized, their knowledge locked away in impenetrable Imperial vaults, accessible only to Vader himself. To Vader, the Force was not a mystical path to enlightenment or a balance of light and dark. It was a tool, a raw, immense power to be understood, harnessed, and wielded for the sole purpose of enforcing his will. Emotions, attachments, the very weakness that had led to Anakin Skywalker's downfall, were to be purged from its application. He sought to master its raw energy, free from the entanglements of feeling or compassion. This cold, detached approach made his Force abilities even more terrifyingly precise. His personal guards reflected this new philosophy. Gone were the shadowy, Force-sensitive Dark Jedi or Emperor's hands that Palpatine had favored. Instead, Vader surrounded himself with elite, unfeeling stormtroopers, their loyalty absolute, their training brutal, and their minds unclouded by the unpredictable nature of the Force. They were extensions of his will, instruments of his order, relying on blasters and sheer discipline rather than arcane powers. The galaxy was to be governed by logic and might, not by the shifting tides of mystical energy. Any whispers of the Force, any hint of its ancient ways, were met with swift, silent, and utterly final suppression. The years under Emperor Vader's rule settled over the galaxy like a shroud of ice. The overt conflicts, the grand battles that had once torn through star systems, were gone. The chaos that Palpatine had, in his own twisted way, sometimes encouraged, was utterly extinguished. In its place was a cold, suffocating peace, enforced by an omnipresent imperial fist. No longer did planets fear pirate raids or the sudden, devastating arrival of a rebel fleet. Those threats had been systematically eliminated, replaced by a far more insidious form of control. This was a peace born not of harmony, but of absolute terror and unyielding suppression. Citizens across the myriad worlds lived under constant surveillance. Imperial security forces, now more efficient and less prone to corruption than ever before, monitored communications, scrutinized gatherings, and enforced a strict code of conduct. Individuality, once celebrated in the diverse cultures of the galaxy, became a dangerous liability. Any deviation from the imperial norm, any expression of independent thought, was swiftly noted and quietly dealt with. Freedom, once a rallying cry for the rebellion, was systematically dismantled. There were no more open markets for ideas, no vibrant cultural exchanges that could foster dissent. Art, music, and literature that did not directly glorify the Empire's order or the Emperor's unwavering might withered and died. Creativity was stifled, replaced by state-sanctioned propaganda that painted Vader's reign as the ultimate salvation, the necessary harsh hand that brought stability to a chaotic universe. Children were taught from an early age about the importance of obedience, of conformity, of the collective good as defined by the Empire. The populations thrived, economically in a sterile, controlled way. Resources flowed efficiently, infrastructure projects were completed, and basic needs were met. But the vibrant spirit of the galaxy, its joy, its spontaneity, its very soul, was slowly being crushed. Laughter became muted, conversations whispered, and hope, for many, became a dangerous, secret flicker in the deepest shadows. It was a galaxy without war, but also without true life, existing under the unyielding, suffocating weight of Emperor Vader's absolute decree. The initial euphoria that swept through the Rebel Alliance after the explosion of the Death Star II and the reported demise of Emperor Palpatine was short-lived. They had celebrated a victory, believing the galaxy was finally free from tyranny. But the joy quickly curdled into a chilling dread as news of Emperor Vader's ascendance and the swift, brutal consolidation of his power spread like a plague. This was not the chaotic infighting empire they had grown accustomed to fighting. This was a unified, terrifyingly efficient machine. Leia Organa, now a weary but fiercely determined leader, felt the weight of this new reality pressing down on her. The strategic blunders and internal squabbles that had often plagued Palpatine's regime, offering the rebellion small windows of opportunity, were gone. Every imperial move under Vader was calculated, every countermeasure precise, every act of rebellion met with overwhelming, unforgiving force. Uniting the disparate systems against this new, more pervasive tyranny became an almost impossible task. Fear was a far more potent unifier for the Empire than hope was for the rebellion. Grand speeches about freedom, once Leia's most powerful weapon, now felt hollow against the backdrop of Vader's absolute control. Large-scale military engagements became suicide missions. The rebellion, once a burgeoning force, was fragmented, its cells scattered and isolated, struggling merely to survive. Their tactics shifted out of necessity. Gone were the dreams of liberating entire planets through open warfare. Instead, they resorted to whispered hopes and desperate, often futile, acts of sabotage. Small, covert teams would strike at Imperial supply lines, disrupt communications, or attempt to free political prisoners. knowing full well the immense risk. Han Solo, ever the pragmatist, found himself running ever riskier smuggling operations. The pursuit of profit had long since been replaced by a grim determination to ferry vital supplies, intelligence, and even desperate refugees to the scattered pockets of resistance. He and Chewbacca navigated increasingly dangerous hyperspace lanes, constantly evading Vader's relentless patrols, their every jump a gamble. The wild freedom they once knew, the carefree days of smuggling for credits, were a distant, aching memory, replaced by the grim, unending fight for a flicker of hope in a galaxy suffocated by Vader's iron grip. Under Emperor Vader, the Galactic Empire's priorities shifted dramatically from Palpatine's often esoteric pursuits to a singular, relentless focus on technological and military advancement. Where the old Emperor had dabbled in ancient Sith lore and grand, often wasteful superweapon projects like the Death Stars, Vader sought practical, unyielding tools of control. His vision was not about grand, symbolic displays of power, but about the cold, hard reality of absolute dominion over every star system. He poured vast resources into Imperial research and development, not for experimental planet-destroying stations, but for refining existing military hardware and developing more efficient methods of surveillance and suppression. New classes of starfighters, faster and more heavily armed, rolled off assembly lines. Star destroyers were upgraded with advanced shielding and targeting systems, making them even more formidable. The Imperial Navy became a perfectly oiled machine, its fleets meticulously maintained and strategically deployed, leaving no sector unchecked. The Stormtrooper Corps, already a symbol of Imperial might, was retrained and re-equipped to an unprecedented degree of discipline and effectiveness. Their training became even more brutal, weeding out any hint of weakness or independent thought. They were no longer just faceless soldiers, they were unthinking, unfeeling extensions of Vader's will, capable of executing orders with chilling precision. Specialized units were formed, designed for rapid planetary pacification and the silent eradication of any resistance cells. This relentless focus on military might and technological superiority created an Imperial war machine unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was lean, efficient, and utterly ruthless. Every innovation, every new weapon, every tactical deployment was geared towards one overarching goal: maintaining absolute, unquestionable control. The vastness of the galaxy, once a challenge to Imperial reach, was systematically brought under heel by this disciplined, powerful force. Worlds that had once resisted now found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer, unyielding might of Vader's empire, their defiance crushed beneath the heel of his technological and military supremacy.